going to do is have quite a unscripted conversation about career pathways, and I'll introduce our fellow panel members in a minute, and really just take a moment to, I guess, reflect back on careers and the many different trajectories they can take. In some ways, we've encouraged ourselves to put our lens with our new graduates, in a sense, who are coming out into the profession as newly minted physical educators and sort of looking to the profession, hopefully bright-eyed and with lots of optimism, thinking, you know, I'm going to be a health and phys ed teacher. And really, I guess, what encouraged me, excited me about the opportunity to do this was to actually stop a moment and think, you know, where does the profession take us? And I was talking to Steve Griffin about a few months ago, and he's the CEO of the city of Greater Geelong, and I was talking a little way through, and I said, you know, what did you do? And he said, oh, I was a phys ed. You know, and it's so not uncommon to bump into people who started out as phys eders and have taken their careers into a whole range of different things and have actually and become community leaders in all sorts of field trajectories and those sorts of things. And it's kind of compelling when we have this sort of notional tag of being the jocks, if you like, for want of a, you know, whether you wear that as a term of endearment or otherwise, it's kind of like they're the ones that run around and don't think a lot. They're the ones that are kind of like the doers, the not thinkers, and yet we have some amazing people getting to some amazing places. And I think that if there's a take-home message in this conversation, whichever way it goes, it is keep your eyes open, and that things will present themselves to you, hopefully, if you are open and willing to look for opportunities. It's amazing how capable our profession is. So our panel members, and I actually thought when I left home you probably had the little screen on each panel member, so I'm going to be really brief, and their stories will tell their own back journey anyway, but I'll give you a little bit of a backdrop of who we're talking to tonight. So in the batting order that they came to me, Peter Wright on my far right, and your left, or for most of you. Peter is currently the principal of Coonung Secondary College and has been for the past 7 years. He's taught physical education and geography at Watsonia High School, Greensborough Secondary College, Canterbury Girls Secondary College, and at Coonung. He's been a really long-time contributor to ACHPER and has held a range of distinguished and honorary positions with the department, including being a moderator for BCE phys ed exams, a chief examiner for phys ed exams, etc., etc. And the list goes on quite extensively. Peter's footprint is quite a significant one. My next opening the batting with Peter is Jude Maguire. Jude probably doesn't need a lot of introduction to most people in this room, as really has been quite a significant person in our field for quite a period of time. Jude is currently the CEO of Sport Victoria and started her journey as a phys eder, as the four of us did. That's basically what we came out of our university qualifications as phys eders and started at that point. She has been a principal of a large high school, but it wasn't long before she was sort of drawn to the ACT to work in School Sport Australia, etc., and has held a range of positions, including being a board member of School Sport Australia as Vice President. She's been the General Manager of Targeted Sport Programs in the Community Sport Division at the Australian Sports Commission, and involved in all sorts of aspects of junior sport. And our youngest, without revealing the age of the other two, the other member of the panel is Airlie Swallow, and Airlie is currently a leading teacher at Northcote High School and is currently the head of the middle school teaching health and physical education. She has previously taught at Craigieburn Secondary College in the junior years and transition leading teacher, and at Mill Park Secondary College as the program and learning outcomes leader. Interestingly, Airlie's in her 9th year of teaching, and she also, as part of her degree, gained the qualification of a personal trainer and was a co-founder of Redback Fitness, a boot camp and fitness business in 2007. I don't know what you do in your spare time, but she also, after doing that, was involved with a colleague and friend in setting up co-founding PE Easy Made, which is around building online network resources and professional development resources for health and PE teachers. So there's lots of experience and differential experiences on the table, and I guess the most sort of, probably the point to start is to is to, as much as possible, the methodology is imperfect in the sense that we're looking back on careers, and at some point they too were all walking out of their degrees thinking, oh, well, I hope I get a job, I hope, I have these sorts of visions. And I was going to ask you, as much as possible, and you'll probably wake up in the night tonight and think, oh, I should have said that, I should have said that, but as much as possible, if you can reflect back onto leaving your degree with your newly minted PhD, PE, HPE or PE qualification, what were your aspirations? Can I start with Jude?
My intention was always that I was just going to take on the world, that I wanted to make a mark for myself and just be the best that I could be. Certainly in Canberra, as it turned out, when I won my principal's position, I was actually told that I was the first female PE teacher to have got to that level, which is quite phenomenal considering here in Victoria I meet so many of them. So I suppose at the very beginning, and I was just brought up that way, I think, was that I'm from a very large family and you just have to survive, and that's what I was like as a teacher. I was never, I was fortunate enough that I had lots of people around me that let me do a lot of things that had an element of measured risk to it. So I always challenged myself, I always looked for opportunities, and really fortunate enough to have a lot of great mentors along the way that allowed me to do that.
We'll go to Airlie. Just yours is more recent in some ways, so it's probably a more etched memory. But where did you see yourself heading straight out into schools, hoping you'd get a job? Did you have a job? Did you know what you'd be doing?
Yeah, I did. So I still remember one of my interviews, well, my first interview for Mill Park Secondary, which is where I started teaching. And my interpretation of being a PE teacher was I went into this so that I can, coach and different sports with young people, go on lots of sports days, go on lots of camps, and that's why I got into it. This was a great idea. Let's be a PE teacher. So all the things that I love doing at school, I get to do for a career now. And I still remember the interview was, oh, you're going to be working with lots of different teams. It's a multi-campus school. What sort of teams and how do you think that you'll be working with at the school? And I was like, basketball team, the netball team. And luckily I got a bit of coaching through that interview, so I was able to think of a bit bigger picture then. But yeah, I think when I first started, it was really just about getting in and being involved with the kids and working with physical activity and teaching lots of different sports and activities to the kids and getting involved in the sporting teams and, putting my hand up for camps and those sorts of things. What I realised though was from day one that that's definitely not what it's all about. So while that's a big part of it, there's so much more, and schools are so much more complex when you get into them, and there's so much more that you can be actively involved in at a school that all changes, and you definitely get to see a bigger picture, and there's a lot more things that you can definitely get involved in within a school environment.
Peter, I trust you're going to tell me you walked out of university intending to be a principal.
No, absolutely not. I'd like to go back a bit further, if I may. When I was in Year 9 at Box Hill High School, my physical education teacher was the full forward for Frankston, and that was his qualification. And we spent a year either being the pack that he took a hanger over, or in the goal square, returning the ball back so that he could practice his goal kicking. And I'm not kidding, that is a fact. The following year, we had our first ever real phys ed teacher, and his name was Jeff Bond. Many of you will know Jeff and his brother Lindsay. They both taught at Box Hill High School. And I entered the first ever phys ed elective offered at the school in Year 10, and basically that's why I'm sitting here where I am now, because at that point in time I hadn't considered being a teacher at all, and those two fellows really did inspire me. So I actually found out what it was like to be taught by someone that was very passionate and very knowledgeable about their subject area. So that's how I ended up making the decision to enter my phys ed course at Rusden. And in those days it was a 4-year course, and it was a practical based course, so I found myself being in the classroom in my first year at Rusden. And from that point in time, I just knew that it was the right thing for me, and I fell in love with the idea of being a teacher. So anyway, I got through Rusden okay, intact. Tricia Robertson is one of my colleagues right through that time, and in fact we've had almost parallel careers, Trish, except I stayed in the teaching game. I stayed in the teaching game a little bit longer than you. My journey has been one of just doing the small things and taking the opportunity to do the small things, which grew into larger and larger things. And I think it's those small opportunities and those small efforts that you make to go out of your way to be involved that can build a career. And I don't think that anybody has ever created a dynasty or become a star sportsman or a rock star overnight. It's a long, hard slog, and you just have to be very confident in what you can do, but also be very resilient, because I did, and everybody does make mistakes on the way. And one of the things that's really important is that you have someone who is perhaps your team leader who's prepared to let you have a go and make a mistake and then help you to just move on and fix it. So I think it's very important that you put people or gather people around you that understand who you are and what you want to do and who have a similar mindset.
Can I throw to Jude? You raise a really interesting point about significant others, you know, and that getting out into the profession in a sense, and other people perhaps creating or allowing you to imagine different opportunities and things like that. Were there significant people? So you're out as a phys ed teacher in school. I'm picturing someone who's open for ideas, looking around for challenges, incredibly competent probably, and work tends to find itself to people who are competent, get the job done. You tend to find more and more work and things come your way. Were there significant people at that point that really started to make things different for you?
Definitely. My first PE faculty that I was in, we actually had our head of faculty, and this was in Canberra, actually spent most of his time, unfortunately, down at the tab, or he'd have a gym full of equipment and the kids would just run amok. So he had this young brigade of, including myself, of new graduates that were working with him, and we learned so much so quickly because of that. And I look back on it now. At the time, it was so stressful a situation to be in, but looking back on it now, we learned an awful lot really quickly. We learned how to rely on each other, work as a team, and every one of us escalated our careers fairly quickly from that point on. But my first appointment as a deputy principal, I was the principal of a multi-campus school at that stage, actually pulled me aside and really got me, I found a love of curriculum which I really hadn't had before, and it was more about middle schooling curriculum and what PE could actually do in terms of working across the curriculum and not just as a standalone subject. And he was very significant. He opened my eyes up to professional development across Australia. I was lucky enough to go on a lot of trips to meet like-minded people, and that then set me on a pathway of looking for opportunities to make a stand for what physical education could actually do for young people at school, not solely just as PE as a subject, and that really set me on the path that I'm at now. I became quite fascinated about what PE did just in general for young people and for communities, and you know, if you look at any of the work that I've done now, it is really all around how community sport and physical education actually need to work together, and that's really what started me off.
Just keep going for a second. When did your messaging or your mind or what you were doing take you outside of the school, some of that being going beyond the boundary of school and start to impact into some of the areas that you would later end up working in, sort of thing? How did that evolve?
Well, it was with my membership of ACHPER in the ACT, and I became also president of School Sport ACT, and that took me to School Sport Australia, where I started to look at not only sport but the connections with ACHPER across Australia. So, and then an opportunity came up. The Australian Sports Commission was starting to develop new divisions within the Commission, apart from just the Institute of Sport that was their high performance area. So they actually needed someone with an education background, and fortunately, because the Commission is based in Canberra, and in my position as a principal at that stage and as chair of School Sport ACT, they asked me if I would like to be seconded across to the Commission to start to work on building this community sport division. And that was really where my passion, I suppose, really took off about trying to engage community sport and physical education and sport in schools.
And clearly no accident that you got spotted. Airlie, you're as we say, you're only 9 years out in a sense, and you're already been heads of departments and all sorts of things, You know, what's happened in that time? How come, in a sense, what's evolved, and how have you positioned yourself to these things, or have you just been toiling away at your desk and people knocked on your door and said, will you head up this?
Yeah, not exactly. So as I said, when I first got into Mill Park Secondary College, I really just immersed myself in the college, and I think that's one thing that you need to do with the schools that you're at, is really have an understanding of what they're about and who they're about. So have an understanding of the staff that work there and what their vision and values are, what the kids are like, what their families are like, the community that you're working with, and sort of really do just immerse yourself in that to have a good understanding of where you are. And I did that, and I spoke with a lot of the staff. I introduced myself to different people. A lady when I first started, she did say, make sure you get out of this office, the PE office at lunchtime, go and meet some other people. While it's great to be in here, it's a good opportunity for you at lunchtime to go and meet some others. And I did that. Whilst I loved the PE people, and I had an amazing head of department who was extremely supportive, and he was one of the ones that I'd come up with all these ideas and he'd say, yep, go for it, and I'm here to support you 100% with whatever you need. So he was fantastic in giving me that opportunity, and I think that allowed me to flourish there and go and meet some of the other people, particularly the leading teachers at the school. So we had a really fantastic leadership team there that were involved in lots of different things. I really respected one of the leaders there and sort of just got talking to him a little bit more. He had, I guess, some way in which he worked with people that I really admired, and which I wanted to sort of be around him a little bit more and have an understanding of how he did that. And one of the things that he was doing there was working on a Year 9 city school program, and he was sort of one of the student managers there, and really getting involved, as Jude was saying, in the curriculum side of things, and how, again, PE can help support that, and how we manage large events, or we manage big groups of kids in outdoor spaces, and how we can actually assist in those types of activities. So I think I sort of piggybacked along with him for a while, and he was my mentor for a really long time at Mill Park through each of those processes. And yeah, just having people that would then sort of go, I think Airlie would be a good, that would be good for Airlie, and I think, Airlie would like that opportunity. And so yeah, once you put yourself out there and you show that you are willing to support different areas of the college and support other colleagues in other areas, people then do come back and they support the PE if the PE's out there supporting other areas as well. So from there, I was then able to put my hand up for a leading teacher position at Craigieburn Secondary College, and I had some great references from Mill Park which supported that application. So that was, I think, how I was able to kind of fast track stepping into leadership from starting off at a PE position.
And clearly, again, I think when you stop and reflect on these things, you realise they're not accidents that people end up in spots. So I always sort of interested, people ask me, well, when did you decide to be an academic? And I always stop and think, I actually never did decide that. I've never actually decided to be an academic. I just kind of, and going back to Peter's story, I think at the time I was asked over to Subiaco in Western Australia to play football, and one thing led to another, and just things sort of like happy accidents along the way, and you end up in certain places. And I just wondered, Peter, when did you decide to be a principal? Did you decide to be a principal, or was it an evolving thing as well?
It was not something that I had a burning desire to do. I felt that I could do the job. I knew that I would be a reasonable principal. My principalship is in a school that I've actually been teaching in for 20 years. And so it was almost, not by default, but almost like succession planning. And I have never applied for a principal position outside of that school. I sat there as an assistant principal for 10 years, just loving it, and really never thought about moving. And then the position became available, and so it wasn't something that I was going to go out of my way to do. It was something that really, it became available, they had faith in me, I applied for the position, and that's how I've ended up being a school principal.
So coming back to Airlie, have you, what have you done in terms of activities, qualifications, in terms of PD, in terms of extra study, or when you finished uni, was that the end and you took that certificate and that was your learning ticked off, or has it been completely different?
No, not at all. I think as soon as you get into a school, there's lots of different PD opportunities that become made available to you, and it's a matter of, I guess, launching yourself onto those and putting your hands up for those as much as possible. The different teams and the different programs you get involved in a school will lead you down different paths as well, and again have different opportunities for PD. One of the things I know, when I was at Craigieburn Secondary College, the department was offering scholarships for, I think it was 30 teachers across the state to do a professional certificate through the University of Melbourne for promoting positive learning and behaviour. And being in a junior school transition role, I thought, yep, that'd be fantastic, and I put my hand up for that and was able to access that, quality education through University of Melbourne as part of a scholarship, and that's just part of it. There's PDs that are run through the schools and through your regions as well that are fantastic. I know I'm off tomorrow actually on a full day PD for powerful learning within the northern region, so that's just something again that you can put your hands up for. Any PD that's accessible. Each year, every year since I've been teaching, I've been to the ACHPER conference at the end of the year, either as a participant or presenting there as well. So there's lots of different PD that you get involved in. I think once you finish uni, and it's not just about you learning, once you actually start teaching, I find you'll miss the learning, and you want to get back to that as much as possible, and you really sort of value that time that you get for you to be a learner as well, because we're busy teaching all day, every day, so the opportunities that we get to learn and really reflect on our practice are valuable as you go through. So I learn every day, whether it's online things as well, so particularly Twitter is a fantastic resource, or even just to get you started as far as PD and find different things that are out there. But whatever your passion is, there's professional development out there for you to seek, so keep an eye out.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story in terms of creating and being the author of your own narrative and being so proactive in that narrative sort of thing. And I think it's a great message that others can take with them. That it doesn't just happen by default, that you actually create that narrative. What about you, Jude? Have you gone on were there PD moments or extra training and things like that you continued with?
Yeah, I think, as Airlie said, it's just a continual learning process. I don't think that just the opportunities that come by, I think you need to just make sure that you're willing to keep your eyes open, and that often those opportunities can come from the most obscure things, whether it be formal professional learning or the informal, just networking with people. Getting opportunities to certainly visit other schools, see what other people are doing, how other people are operating. I know I've been really, really fortunate and had an enormous wealth of opportunity in the various roles that I've had to, even though they're very different positions that I've held, they've all had still that connection with physical education and sport. And in the end, what drove me back to, certainly in education, was the fact that I missed it incredibly. And coming back to education and being involved with the Ministry of Sport as well as has allowed me the opportunity to provide not only professional development for teachers in Victoria, but certainly even for my staff and myself. So we're still looking. You never know everything, so it's just been a wonderful path, certainly a pathway for me.
Just while you're talking, have there been sort of, when you reflect back, have there been any really critical moments where you've had to make really important career decisions? Do I leave this school? Do I take on this role? I've got this opportunity. Don't I take it? When you reflect back, do you reflect back with some misgiving about some of them and fondly on others, or
I think relatively the same as what Peter was talking about never really aspiring to be a principal. It just kind of happened. But in ACT at the time, they had a process where you weren't allowed to stay at the one school for very long, which for a system like the ACT was very was fantastic for it, because it rejuvenated every school. In your first placement, you could only stay for 4 years. Your second placement, you could only stay 6 years. Your third placement was 8 years, and if you lasted after that, you could stay forever. And as a principal, you could only stay at school for 6 years, and if you didn't find a new school, they'd find one for you. So it was incredibly a volatile, rotating system, but in that, you were always getting new ideas and refreshing different looks at how to do things. And at my school, the turning point for me was having the opportunity of going to the Sports Commission and knowing that it was a huge opportunity, but I was just so passionate about my school and about the job. And the day I actually left, I was really only a secondment and I was coming back, and I remember my director saying to me, "Jude, you'll never come back. You don't ever go backwards, it'll be forwards for you." And that last day at the school, I mean, I'd still get teary about it. I could not believe that I'd put myself in that position, that I was actually leaving. And I tell this lovely story about this group of boys that when I get into school really early every morning, as most principals do, they live there. But I put on the coffee pot, and after a while there was a group of boys that I had 16-year-olds, and I called them my Great Dane puppies, all arms, legs, and not very much in their brain yet. And they really didn't have, it was a pretty tough area, if you could call a tough area in Canberra, and they didn't have much of a home life to go to, so school was their home, and they saw it as their territory. And after a while, they knew that I was there, and they could smell the coffee, and they'd stick their head in, "Hi Mags," and that was my nickname, Mags, can you spare a cup of coffee? And in the end, I would have 16 boys every morning for coffee and muffins, and we'd sit around and at the table chatting, and sometimes we'd go for a walk and just check that no one had graffitied the school, and in the end they became like my police guards at the school. They'd patrol the playground at recess and lunchtime. They were like the greatest advocates, and they could never work out why Mags always knew what was happening, because they didn't realise that they were telling me in their discussion. So it became such a home life. But those 16 boys still are really good friends of mine to this day, and I think that's the part of what drove me from this commission back into education, and to try and have some difference, was that it is the most incredibly fulfilling job that I think anyone can ever have. So congratulations to all of you over there.
Thanks, Jude. What about you, Peter, in terms of career decisions, and particularly if you can reflect on early on, and I guess sort of juggling family and all those sorts of things, we do make career decisions along our journey, do you reflect back on any pivotal ones?
Well, what I would like to say is that, yes, there was one in particular, and I'll relate that shortly. I have been someone that has never just been a teacher, or just an assistant principal, or just a principal. I've always had something else going on, and ACHPER was a really important part of my development for a period of 10 to 15 years. It was through that really exciting time when we were launching the first ever Year 12 Phys Ed subject, which eventually morphed into being a VCE study. I worked across Victoria with ACHPER and the VCAA or VCAB or VCAR or whatever it was back then. All of those things all of those things have prepared me and to be a school principal. Initially, I'd never even given it a thought, but as I look back on all of those opportunities that I've had to work with people in teams and interrelate with staff and hear about what's been going on around the traps, ACHPER's been a very important part of that. And so I wanted to thank ACHPER really for giving me the opportunity to develop all of those skill sets. But I can remember in my first few years of teaching, I was a tennis coach, and I was coaching 4 nights a week and Saturday and Sunday morning and playing tennis, and I built up a pretty good business actually in addition to the teaching. So I was teaching full time in addition to doing that. There came a point in time about 8 years in where I really had to make a decision about, was I going to expand my tennis coaching business or wind it back and stay in the game of teaching. And it didn't take me very long to make the decision, and for me it was all about being able to work with other people as part of a team, and I really couldn't see that as something that was going to sustain, that my tennis coaching wasn't going to sustain me around that. So I basically wound it down and handed it off to somebody else, and then I really put everything into my teaching. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life, to be honest. It's one of the most family-friendly jobs you can do, and I do have a family, and it's been wonderful to spend time with my children during the school holiday periods. It's something that a lot of people don't factor in to the game of teaching, particularly for people with families. So yes, I had to make a decision. I made the right one, and very happy to be sitting where I am now doing what I'm doing now.
Fantastic. Airlie, what about you? You're 9 years out, and there's probably people sitting over my far left who think, oh, gee, I hope I get a job. And yet 9 years out, you've had 3 different schools on my count, and you've done other things. There's obviously already been career decisions that you've had to pop up and make along the way. Take us through some of those so far.
Yeah, sure. So similar to Peter with the Redback Fitness, so we had a boot camp business, a friend and I, that we absolutely loved studying at uni. We loved resistance training and exercise prescription and those sorts of subjects, and so through that received our personal trainer qualification and wanted to get out and really work with some people and run boot camps and those sorts of things, and we did that. And it's still running, and up until I think about 18 months ago, I was still running boot camps 3 times a week for the year whilst teaching and doing all the leadership roles and things like that. So really busy, and I similarly hit a point where I was like, well, this is getting a little bit too much, and where is my passion? Is it with boot camps or is it with teaching? And as big as our boot camp business was getting, both my friend and I were just like, you know what, we actually really love teaching. We could never just quit that or stop that and continue with the boot camps full time, because we just love what we do day to day. We love getting in the classroom with the kids and giving these young people opportunities that a lot of them don't have in their home lives, and giving them that passion for lifelong physical activity. And we really get to make a difference in our classrooms each and every day. And whilst boot camps is you're getting people fit, it's not the same as what you get to have in a school environment and in a classroom with the kids. So that was a decision I made probably 18 months ago, was to sort of step back from the running of the sessions and from sort of being actively involved in that business. Previously to that though, we had organised, another business, because we understand how busy PE teachers are and how often, we are involved in different roles of responsibility. If you look at most schools and you look at the responsibility positions within that schools, whether it be coordinators or curriculum leaders or leading teachers, you've got a high percentage of them that are phys editors. So when it comes to, putting time into your classes and into PE, sometimes that isn't, the first thing that comes up after a few years. So we actually created PE Made Easy, which is, an online site with different resources for PE teachers. And that's something that we found that we absolutely love, because it meshes in so nicely with what we're doing day to day. We're developing resources for our classes and working hard with our kids, and being able to share that with other schools, with other PE teachers, through Facebook or through Twitter or through the website with resources is a really great opportunity. So moving forward here, that's something that I think I would really like to continue doing, is running those simultaneously, because they mesh really well. I love Northcote. I've just started there this year, and I love everything about the school and the culture that's there, and the kids are brilliant. So following on and teaching and leading the middle school there at Northcote, but also working through PE Made Easy with PE teachers, and I guess helping them do that. One of the things I did earlier this term was head out to a school and run a PD session for their PE staff and just give them ideas and I guess best practice, and that was, I guess, one of the highlights of my year so far, was to be able to share that knowledge and get the feedback from them and have an understanding that, you know, what we've been doing has really helped them and their kids. So yeah, that's where I'll be headed.
James, my son, finished his VCE last year, and one of the things he's never been sure what he wanted to do. He didn't know what to do, and I think the message we sold him was, if you get the best score you can, you get more choices. You can do. It doesn't matter. It's okay at 17 not to know what you want to do, but if you go well, you've got a lot more choice than if you don't go well. And I think that he bought into that. And I guess in a take-home message, and I'll start with you, Jude. What's your take-home message to our newly minted graduates who are heading out, who potentially want to keep opportunities available or create opportunities for themselves to have opportunities come to them? What would your advice be in terms of professional and career advice to them now?
I think I could go back to what Peter was talking about very early on, is when you're starting out your teaching career, make sure that you provide yourself with many opportunities that come your way, that you surround yourself with like-minded people, and just make sure that you're the best that you can be, and keep everything that you want, everything that you try to do, be very aspirational about it. I think what you were talking about earlier, you know, the generation of the PE person being the jock is long gone, and there are a multitude of things that a physical education teaching degree can do for you. But certainly as you're beginning out, just learning so much from experienced teachers around you, that whole art of teaching, as much as you may have thought that you've learned a lot while you're at university, you don't know anything yet. And I think that's really what you need to be aware of, is that being in front of a class, being in front of that challenge of having umpteen number of classes and all the challenges that they bring, you need to make sure that you have lots of support around you and some old heads that can guide you.
Airlie, what about you in terms of some, you know, as your evolving, emerging wisdom gathers, what's your advice in terms of careers?
Let your passion shine. So make sure that you are passionate about what you're doing. Be enthusiastic, and let that live. You know, go and build relationships with people within the school. Relationships are everything when you're in the workplace, and you know, really get to have an understanding of the people that you're working with, the kids, the community, the families that are there. Build those relationships and make them strong, and then that'll, you know, set you up for being able to put through ideas and aspirations that you have coming through. When it's regards to your teaching though, just remember that, you know, you really will make a difference to the young people that are in your classes, so make sure you keep them first, and everything else will follow after that.
Thanks. And Peter, some parting wisdom in terms of, you know, young graduates?
Well, speaking as a principal, I would say in your first year you need to concentrate on building your craft. You need to concentrate 100% on what is happening in your classroom. It is tempting in your first year of teaching, if that's where you end up, to try and be involved in everything. A good principal will actually say to you, no, I'm really pleased to hear that you want to do this and go on that camp and teach that sporting team and so on. But a really good principal will say, look, hey, just wait and get the teaching right first. So that's really important. But it's also important to let the people around you, you know, the people that are in your team and those that are, you know, supervising you, that you are interested in other things, and don't ever assume that you can't access that leadership role or that you can't be part of that professional development team, because if you assume that, it'll never happen for you. You've got to let people know what you want, where you want to go, and that you're prepared to be involved and be part of it. But as a first year teacher, just get it right in the classroom first, and just don't think that you've got it all right now, because good teachers improve every year. They get better every year, even after 30 years. And there are some teachers who have not grown in 15 or 20 years, and they're the ones that you just want to say, can you just please turn the switch on again? There are ways of making that happen, but there are too many people who just think they've got to the point where they know it all, nothing can be any better or any different, and so they stop learning. Don't be one of those.
Thank you. So I think, you know, the advice is kind of clear and resound in terms of look for opportunities. It's really about an attitude. I think instead of you don't know where you're going to be, and no one here, all of us kind of reflected on, actually at the start probably didn't know what the end point would be, and the end point is still evolving as it is. So it's largely about an attitude to being open to it, looking for opportunities, creating opportunities, and they will come without any doubt. So on behalf of you all, can I invite you to thank our panellists.